Welcome, everyone. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time, so let's get started. I've started recording this webinar. Welcome to a Dedupe and Match webinar. My name is Sridhar from Apsona, and I will be your host today. I will walk you through some of the new functionality we have in our Dedupe and Match add-on, which we brought out last fall. So what you're seeing here, I'm hoping, is an NPSP org in which Apsona is installed. As you can see, there's Apsona lives as a tab in this org. And I'm looking at the contacts tab here. And what I'm going to do is show you, first of all, the dedupe capability, where we'll talk about the single table deduplication process. And then towards the end, we will talk a little bit about the Match CSV capability. We'll look at each one of those questions separately. So to begin with, here's in this org, I have the Dedupe and Match add-on installed. So I'm looking at contacts. Let's just jump right in and look at the Dedupe tool. Every object in your org will have the ability to run deduplication, as in identify duplicates. Right now, we only support merging of duplicates on accounts, contacts, and leads, and that will change in the fairly near future. But let's just look at contact deduplication today. In the tools menu, once you have the Dedupe add-on available, you will find an extra menu item, Dedupe Match, which contains two sub-items, Dedupe and Match CSV. So the way you get to the deduplicator is by hitting the Dedupe menu here. And when you do so, you have a list of what we call dedupe actions, which are each dedupe action is basically a container that represents all of the things that have to happen associated with finding duplicates in a particular way. So if you're familiar with some of the competing products, for example, Demand Tools calls this thing a scenario. And there's similar names that are given to this thing by other competing products like Cloudingo as well. So what I'll do is just, instead of looking at the test dedupe actions here, let's just jump in and build a brand new one so that you can get a feel for the build process and the save process and edit process and so on. So let's begin by clicking new. And when doing so, we will be taken to this screen where first thing we do is give it a name, give a name to the dedupe action. So let's give this action a name. Let's call it dedupe demo 215. Right now, we can also give it a description, sample description, let's say, and look at the tabs across the top here. Each of these represents one particular aspect of the deduplication. The first thing that you would want to specify is, where do your deduplication records come from? Where are the records that you want to deduplicate? Basically, the problem we're trying to solve is find given a particular set of records, find duplicates among them, and then show them in groups of duplicates, then figure out how to merge them into single records. That's the general thought process. Now, there's a couple different modes in which you would want to find duplicates. One is to say, I'm going to restrict myself to just a certain filtered list of records. For example, it might be that you know that you have all of the records you want to deduplicate have a mailing street. So you're not really interested in deduplicating contact records that don't have a mailing street value associated with them. So given that knowledge, you can say, make me a filter, and in that filter, I'm going to add, you know what, I'm already finding a little bit of irritation here in that I'm feeling constrained by the lack of real estate here. I have this huge menu bar at the top. So what I'm going to do is, given that we're running in Lightning in Apsona, you will see that there is this extra pop-out available. So if you just click it, it'll take you to a new full screen representation where you've got all of Apsona available in that window. So it gives you a little more real estate. So let's start over here. Let's go into dedupe and then make a new dedupe action. And let's give this a name as before. So let's call it demo 215 with a sample description. And back here, as I was saying, let's add a filter term. And let's give this a filter term. Let's find the mailing street. Mailing street right here. And let's say that it is not empty. So that restricts the set of records to only those that have a mailing street. There is another option, which is this CSV file thing, which is for a different use case where if you have an SME that maintains a list of record IDs of masters and non-masters, and you just want to apply deduplication to those record IDs and not worry about filtering. And we'll see if we can get to that. I may have time to show that case as well. So the first thing we've done, we've identified which records we want to deduplicate. And then we can go over to match fields. And in the match fields tab, what we're doing is we're identifying the fields based on which we say that two records are duplicates of one another. So the obvious first attempt would be to say, since we're deduplicating contacts, we're trying to find duplicate contacts. Let's just say two contacts are the same if their first name is the same and their last name is the same. Very simple kind of a criterion here. So when I click those two fields, I find these two entries on the right telling me what the selected fields are. And there is also some additional functionality here around what the match function should be, what the contraction should be, which we'll talk about in a minute, and what it means to be, what word order ignored means in a second. So before looking at any further aspects of these other tabs, let's just get some quick gratification and hit the find button. And you immediately see a list of duplicates. And it is telling you, well, there's 17 records in 8 groups. So it found 8 duplicate groups and a total of 17 records. Clearly, one of them has 3. Well, here's one group with 3 duplicates. Wanda Dunn happened to occur 3 times in this database. Now, as soon as you look at this, you think, well, this is not enough information to determine what is a duplicate. I'm only being shown the first and last name. I don't know which of these records really needs to be retained and which others need to be dispensed with. In other words, which one should be the master and which ones should be the non-master. And to discriminate among them, I need to get additional information, in other words, additional fields into this table. So how do I do that? I go back up to the top, I click the Additional Fields tab, and here I'm able to select the additional fields to be shown here. Notice that I can pick additional fields not only from the current object, but also from looked up to objects. Someone had a question? Let's see. Cool, so I'm not answering it, so yeah, I'll get back to answering more questions toward the end of the demo. So when it comes to additional fields, I can select, for example, on the contact side, let's say we get the email address, let's say we get their business phone. And the other things too is that oftentimes when you want to distinguish among records that you want to eliminate, you want additional information that's specific to some fields. For example, you might want to know when a record was created. So you might want to get the created date, and you may want to get the last modified date. When was it most recently modified? So let's get that as well. One other thing for this particular use case, you'll find that we'll see in a minute why. Let's also get the lead source of the contact. So we get these 5 additional fields. And now when I do a find, you see that the list widens out, and you've got all of the additional fields you need. And if you really need to, you can get additional info from the other objects as well. I can say, for example, from the account field, I can get the account name and the account number so that you can get more fields from looked up to objects. So when I hit find there, I get yet more fields here toward the right. So now let's look at this grid in a little more detail and look at what kinds of functionality is available here. First of all, for each one of these records, each row, you see this little icon to the left. So that is the standard Apsona icon that lets you open the record in Salesforce. So if I click this icon, it opens up that record in Salesforce, as you can see in a moment. We found no potential duplicates. That's okay. Um, so that's the other thing. Sorry, I got distracted there for a second. Let's look at the other features here. There's this icon, obviously. There is this indicator for a score, which we'll get to in a minute. And then there are these other fields as you would expect. This grid is resizable. All of the usual things you would expect in a grid are available here. There is some development underway for doing in-place editing here, which we'll talk about later. So now, before doing any further damage, before actually merging anything at all, your first order of business would be to export your data. So you can go into export and say there's a couple different ways to export. You can export the grid data. When you click that, you will get a resulting CSV file that contains the data in the grid exactly as it is laid out. There's Excel coming up, and there's a couple of extra columns that you will see to the left. There's the duplicate signature, which I didn't talk about. I will in a second. There is a score, which we'll talk about later. There's the contact ID. So these first three columns are extra information. And beyond that, the rest of the fields are first name, last name, email, business phone. As you can see that the fields that are here are in the Excel sheet in exactly the same order, right? Let's talk about this signature a bit here. You see that it's actually a composite of the first name and the last name that we selected as the criteria for finding duplicates. So if you go back up to the top, you see in the match fields, we selected first name and last name exact. We said we want exact matches in both of those cases. And so basically what it did was it pulled out what it calls a signature. It just strings out the two field values together, separated by spaces, separated by a double underscore, and treats that as what is called the signature of the record. So two records will be treated as duplicates of each other if they have the same signature. So all of this duplicate calculation is centered around having the correct signatures for finding duplicates. And so it often is useful to have that duplicate signature available for managing the duplicates and figuring out which ones you really want to merge. So back here, while we're talking about exports, it is also possible to export all of the data. This is really more of a backup thing. If you want to back up all of the grid data here before you do the merge, before you destroy anything, you can hit the all data item, in which case you will get a somewhat different layout in the CSV file. Take a look at this. You see that now you've got all of the fields, all the contact, left to right, contact ID, deleted, master record, and so on. And as you scroll to the right, you see all of the fields, all the contact. Everything's available here. If you really need to restore from a backup, this is one way to do it. Of course, the other thing also to remember is that when we do the merge, the non-masters will be deleted, but they will be in the recycle bin. So you can actually go into the recycle bin and restore from there, and you will have that data available. So let's close that off. And then for the rest of the grid, well, in each grid, you have the record count of the number of records in the group. And then up at the top, you have the number of records in the number of groups. That's about everything to say about the grid here. The obvious thing next is to say, well, this is fine in that we got duplicates with exact matches. What about cases where we want to match in a more loose fashion? Excuse me. Typically, when you want to do a deduplication process, you would have a rather tight criteria set initially. You would say exact matches, and let's make sure that all of the exact matches are gotten rid of. And then we'll start loosening the match criteria so that you get more and more duplicates identified. So if you look at this match function up here, you have a whole range of matching functions available. There is, of course, the exact match, which is the default. Then there is case-insensitive, which says that if the two fields match exactly but are different in case, then we treat that as a match. So for example, if you look at last name, case-insensitive, let us say, and we scroll down here. Now take a look at what happens when I hit find. Look in particular at the signature. So if I hit find here, the signature now changes to lowercase. So if you've got two names that match most of the way except they differ in case, then they would be caught here. Those sorts of duplicates would be caught here. I don't know that we have. Oh, there's one. We have a case where two names match exactly except for case, and so those two are treated now as duplicates of each other. Then there's a bunch of other ones here. One thing that comes to mind is when it comes to first name, you would want to match based on first name rather than on exact matches. The idea being that if you select this option, the commonly used first names like Rob being a contraction for Robert, or Bill for William, or Deb for Deborah, those kinds of matches will be accounted for when you do a first name match. So let's try that. When I look at what happens here, we have 19 records in 9 groups right now. But when I hit find now, I have 63 records in 29 groups because it identified more duplicates. Abby and Abigail are treated as duplicates of each other. Further down, Davy, David are duplicates of each other, Dave and David, and so on. So you can see that it knows about first names and how they map to common names here. What's really happening there is that the contraction, the short version of the name, gets mapped to the full version of the name in the signature. So Deb is mapped to Deborah, and similarly Deborah is mapped to Deborah. So they're now treated as the same. So far, so good. Now, the next thing to look at is that, well, there's these other options that we probably can spend a little time on. There's you can match on first two letters, first 3, first 5, first 7, first 2 words, and so on. There's street addresses, company names, zip codes. All of these things are available. By the way, if you find that there are other criteria that you would like to use, you would like to have available, that are not available in Apsona, let us know. As always, we keep adding functionality to this app, so we'll add more features as and when you see the need for them. Also note that when you click this thing, how to use this feature, it'll take you to the page where the entire process is described in gory detail. So if you scroll down here, look at the match functions right here, it shows you all of the match functions available, telling you how exactly each of them works. It gives you examples of what's going on in each case. Any questions I need to take at this point? Okay. All right, so we'll go back to the deduplication process here. Let's do an illustration of how actually one does a merging here. So to do a merge, there's a couple different ways that you can merge records. One is to say, let's do what is called a custom merge. So we can do a one-off merge where we look at a particular group, we say we know, excuse me, we know, one second. So we look at a group and we know that, let's say David in this case is the one that must be retained as master, and the other one can be deleted, can be merged into the master. So what we do is we hover over the group bar here, and you see these 2 buttons here. One of them is for removing the group from merging. The other is for merging. So this is what is called a custom merge. When you click this thing, it first tells me, well, please select a master record for this group, which I did not do. How do we select a master record? Well, we select it by just clicking on it. Note the behavior of the master record selection here. If I click on the other record, that becomes the master. If I click a record again, the master nest goes away. So there's no more master here. So let's go back and select this one. The point being, what I wanted to illustrate was that in any given group, you can select at most 1 master. So it knows that fact. And let's see if we can find one that here's a big one. I can click around here and you see that the master varies all over the place and changes to the correct one, the one that I selected. So let's go back up here. Let's look at the David Harkness here and then hit merge. When we do that, we have this little pop-up that shows us the master we have selected and the other records to the right. In this case, I've got only one other record in this group, so it shows me that other record. And some things to note here: the fields that you see in this column are the ones that are modifiable, not the ones that cannot be modified. In other words, if you've got a formula field in Salesforce, or you look at the created date, last modified date, those kinds of things, they will not show here, except the contact ID. The contact ID obviously is not modifiable, right? But still, as a convenience, we show that because in some cases you do need to know which contact ID is being merged. But the rest of the fields that you see here are only the ones that can be modified. And then if there is a discrepancy among the fields in this group, then that field in the master is highlighted in green. So in other words, if you look at this field, the account field, or if you look at the average gift field, the values in the master and the non-master are the same, which means that there is no point in copying the non-master value into the master when you do the merge. So the only ones that are of interest would be the ones that have a highlight on them, right? So the ones that have green on them are the ones that you really want to be focusing on, because the rest don't need to be merged. And then that brings up the question: why do I want to see all of these fields if there's only a few of them that have that need to be merged? Well, you can change that. You can just hit mismatches only, and it only shows you the ones that are discrepant, let us say, the ones that are differ among the master and the non-master. And given that, you can also now click the other field and make its value prevail over the one that was previously selected. So if I click Davy here, the merged master will have the first name value Davy instead of David, right? And then when you hit, at this point, when you hit merge, it will remove the non-masters and merge the values into the master. And I won't do that at this point, just so I want to keep the data for a bit. One other thing to bear in mind is that non-master records will be deleted, as I said, and they will end up in the recycle bin. Also, child records of the non-masters will be automatically reparented to the master. So that's the other thing to keep in mind here. So much for that as far as custom merge. Now, let's look at the other case. Anything else I need to do? Okay. All right, so let's look at the other case where you really don't want to spend all day long trying to do a click through each one of these groups, particularly when you have a case where you have a lot of duplicates, 500 groups, let us say, and you don't want to go through every single one of them trying to find a master. So what you do is you try to identify masters based on what are called scoring rules. So that's where you have these additional master field rules available. And when we go there to that, when we go over to the master field rules, before I go there, one other thing that's worth pointing out is that there are use cases where you really don't want to look at all of these different groups. You want to focus on a restricted set of groups, yes, but also based on a criterion that at least one of the elements, one of the records in the group has a certain criterion, has a certain property to it. For example, you might say, well, there was a mass import that happened last night, which accidentally produced a lot of duplicates. And I know for a fact that in every one of those records, it produced a lead source of partner referral. So what I want to do is I want to restrict my deduplication to those groups in which at least one of them has partner referral as its lead source. So in order to achieve that, I would go into group selection and add a term here that says that the lead source of the contact is among partner referral. And now when I hit find, we're now down to 17 records in 7 groups. And you notice that every one of them has at least one with partner referral in it. So there's partner referral in this group, there's a partner referral in this group, and so on. So that's one way to narrow down the range of records that you want to merge. Then let's say we want to do a set up master and field rules. Well, let's see. At this point, it seems like I probably want to save my work. I don't want to lose all the stuff that I did. So I can do a save and find here. And what happens now is that it does a find all right, but it has also saved the merge, the dedupe action. So if I go back to the list, if I click back to the list up here, you see that the demo 215 dedupe action is now available. So when I click that again, I'm back into the same dedupe action with all of the choices I have made already set up. So that's one way of saving a dedupe action so that you can reuse it again. So now let's go look at, let's do a find so that we have the data available. So now let's try and find the masters based on scoring rules. So we go into master and field rules here. And this is a somewhat complex tab in that it has a bunch of different things to watch for. First off, there is the notion of rules to identify the master record. So you can add a rule here that says, okay, I want only those as master records. Let's say I want those that have a lead source equals partner referral, gets a score of 1. When I hit add rule and I hit find, you notice that there is a score associated with each one of those rows. And in this case, you see that in this group, for example, this record, the second one, does not have a partner referral value, and therefore it gets a score of 0, whereas the one that has a partner referral value gets a score of 1. Now, it may be that you have other criteria that you want to add. Let's say we want to add a rule that says, let's say the last gift amount is the highest in the group, gets a score, let's say, of 3. And then I hit find, and you see that this one now gets a score of 4 because it has both the partner referral and the highest value of the last gift amount, which I didn't pull in here, which we can pull in if we want to. So basically, we have a scoring mechanism. So each of the records in the group is given a score, and additionally, the record with the highest score automatically becomes the master. You see that it is checked, it appears in boldface, and its score value appears to the left. So it actually, at this point, you can even export the grid data at this point, and as we said earlier, you will get the scores associated with the values the records that you chose here. So once you've selected the masters in this manner, you can then do, well, before we go there, more things on this side. Tie breaking. It may be that 2 records have the same score, in which case we want to break ties. And the ties are broken based on whatever you say here. All ties are broken based on, with this choice, the one record which is the most recently modified. In other words, if two records both qualify with the same score, I want the more recently modified of the 2 to be the master. And I can change that by saying most recently created or oldest modified or what have you. So that's the tie-breaking piece. In addition, before we do a merge, we may want to retain null values from non-masters. So in other words, it may be that once you've selected a master, you know that some fields in the master are empty, and you want to make sure that the corresponding value from the non-master is copied over into the master before doing the merge. So you do that by checking this box that says overwrite empty or null master fields with non-master fields if available. So keep in mind that if available, in other words, if a master is not empty, it will not be overwritten, and a master will never be overwritten with a null value. So it will only consider the non-empty values in the non-masters to overwrite. The other thing too is to add field level overwrites. It may be that you want your lead source to always come from the one that was oldest, or maybe you want your department to come from the record which was the oldest created. Maybe for some reason you know that the first time someone registered themselves in your organization, they always gave you the department value, and maybe you want that to prevail always. Or maybe you want another rule that says their email address should always be the non-master with the last modified date the newest. So the most recent email address is the one that should prevail in every case. So you can add those sorts of field level overrides here so that you know particular fields are written out exactly the way you want, regardless of which record is the master. So those bits control the way the merge behaves once we actually do the merge. These bits up here, the combine fields bits, have to do with combining fields of certain types. Specifically, they talk about fields that are text fields, HTML or rich text fields, and multi-select pick list fields. If you have a text field, for example, it's very common for people to accumulate notes in text fields. And maybe you have notes in a master and a non-master, and you don't want to lose those notes. So what you do is you take the contact description, for example, a text field, and you check it. When you do that, the merge simply concatenates all of the description values from all of the merge records into the master. And the concatenation is separated by line breaks if it's a text field. If it is a rich text or HTML field, it's separated by a BR tag so that it's a normal HTML break. And then if it's a multi-select pick list, it merges the values together. So for example, if the master has a multi-select with values A and B, the non-master with C and D, then the resulting merged record will have the values A, B, C, D in that field. So that's what combining fields does. Once you've set all this up, you can do a merge all. And in this case, it will merge all of the groups which you want, which are shown here, based on the master criteria masters that you set up here. Notice that even after you have set up the masters, you can go off and change the master if you wanted to. Right? You can click on the row and you can change it. You can also deselect the entire group by simply clicking the master again. So I can get rid of these and say, don't even bother merging these groups. I can click on the master row and its masterness goes away so that when I do a merge all now, you see we're down to 3 of 7 groups to be merged. Right? So that's another way of controlling which groups will be merged. Another thing to note here is the use small batches checkbox. That's useful in some cases where if you have like a backend trigger that's misbehaving or it's not bulkified or whatever, or you have a flow that is not able to handle a large volume of merges at one time, you can try using a small batch when merging. The idea being that Apsona tries to be as quick as possible in its processing, so it uses the maximum possible batch size, which is 200. And sometimes you have these backend issues that come up when you do the merge. So you can use small batches, and in that case, it'll drop down the batch size to 5 so that it typically goes through with a lot less issues in this case. So when I click proceed, it'll merge all of these guys and give you a status with an Excel that you can download to see what the results were of the merge. And it'll show you the errors and so on. Couple of other little things that are worth pointing out. In the more menu here, you can clone this action or you can delete this action. Let's say if I do a save and find, I have the whole thing saved up now. I can also clone it. When I clone it, I give it a copy and save it. And you see that now I have a copy available that I can work with without having touched the old one. I can also delete the record, delete the action, delete this action, and it goes away. In similar context, the list of dedupe actions is available as usual with the Apsona items object. So if I go in here and look for item type dedupe action like this, I will find all of the dedupe actions that are available in the org. Here's the one that we just created. So all of that's available in the usual Apsona mechanisms. So let's go back to contacts here. That's about all I want to say about dedupe actions. The next thing I want to talk about is Match CSV. Take a deep breath and let's change gears here. So now what we're going to do is talk about a different problem. Not about deduplication. It's about trying to find records that match a particular set of incoming CSV data. So the idea is that you're given from maybe a third-party source a CSV file that contains some data records, and you want to see whether there are matching data records in your Salesforce org that match those records. Well, and when you say whether there are matching, that word matching is sort of significant there in that by matching we mean match based on any of these loose criteria, not just based on the standard SQL exact or case-insensitive matches. So to serve that need, we have this add-on capability called Match CSV, and that's what I'm going to show next. But to do that, let me first show you the CSV file I'm going to use. This is my input CSV file. It contains the account name, an email address, first name, last name, mailing city, mailing state, etc. So it's got a bunch of data in it. And what I want to do, I have 62 records in here. What I want to do is find which of these records actually occur in my Salesforce database. So let's go back to Apsona here and hit Tools, Dedupe Match, Match CSV. And this pop-up now shows up. In this pop-up, you've got 4 steps. First step, we choose the CSV file. Second step, we'll match fields. Third step, we will select additional fields. And in the last step, we'll add a filter condition and actually execute the match. So first thing we'll do is choose a file. So when you click choose file and select this one, it gives you a preview of that CSV file. The idea here is that you want to know, given that you may be working with a lot of different CSV files, you want to know which one it is you're actually going to be working with. So this validates the choice that you just made. It gives you this preview, just shows you 4 of the 62 rows that it found, right? So you can validate that. Then we hit next. And when we do so, it gives us the columns of the CSV file. In the first column on the left, it's showing me account, email, first name, last name. Those were the things that we saw in, well, let's see, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. See, these fields that we saw across the top are the ones that it shows vertically downwards here. And let's say that we want to match the first name, and we want the first name column, this one here, to be matched to the field named first name. So that points up the fact that these column names don't necessarily have anything to do with actual Salesforce column names. They can be anything. So we're just showing you the list of names, the column names that are found here, and we can line them up against the corresponding Salesforce fields. So the first name I want to match against the first name match field. And what I want to do also is I want to do a loose match. I want to say the first name will be a first name match. And the last name, let us say, will be a regular old case-insensitive match. We don't do any contractions, which we didn't really talk about, contractions and alphanumerics. Well, let me briefly touch on that. When we do a contraction, which is alphanumerics only, we're basically going to remove all of the non-alphanumerics, all punctuations. So it's a way of saying if there's commas or periods or quotes or whatever in your data, you want to ignore them when comparing for duplicates. That's one way to do this. The fuzzy choice actually uses the metaphone algorithm to treat 2 fields as equivalent if they sound similar. So those are standard match criteria that are available in most products these days, and that's available here as well. Word order ignored lets you treat two fields as equivalent if their order, they have the same data but in different word order, such as, for example, County of Santa Clara being equivalent to Santa Clara County, right? So you can choose those if you want to, or if you need to. Then we hit next. And at this point, we go to the stage 3 where we've got additional fields that we can use. Let's say in addition to the contact ID, I also want the actual full name, actual first name rather, and then the actual last name. And I can get additional information from looked up to objects, maybe the account name, maybe the billing city of the account, billing street, etc. So I can pull out a bunch of fields here and hit next. And finally, I'm going to filter so that I reduce the range of records that I'm going to match against. So let's say I know that I'm only going to match against ones that have a mailing street. So I'm going to once again use that same criterion, mailing street exists or is not empty. And I hit finish, and it completes, and it lets me download the results, which I can save. And you can now see the matched CSV results. So what we see here is the matched fields, the first so many are the account, email, first name, last name. Just for comparison, let's see if we can bring up the other one. You see account, email, first name, last name, and so on are available here, account, email, first name, last name, and so on. But to the left of those, you've got the signature, the match count, which tells you the number of records that matched based on the criteria that you've got, and the additional fields to the right that we selected. So down here, for example, Aaron Newald has has double match, so that record shows up twice. Similarly, this record has a match count of 5, so it shows 5 times as 5 rows in here. And so that's how you pull match criteria or CSV matches from your Salesforce database. In terms of availability, the deduplication is available for all objects, but the merge capability is not available for anything but contacts, accounts, and leads. And that's something we'll be building in the near future. The find CSV capability is available across all objects. So you can just click to tools and dedupe match and match CSV, and you will find it there. So for example, over here, if I hit close and I go into opportunities and I go tools, dedupe match, match CSV, I get the same pop-up I can use for finding duplicates. And the deduplication capability only has find duplicates. It doesn't have the match yet, as I said earlier. At this point, there's really not a whole lot more for me to say. I'm going to take questions. Let's see if I can answer some questions here. Let's go chat as well. Let's look at the chat. Okay. I'm going to try and go from bottom to top because I think some of these questions have been answered. Which match CSV function could you have multiple email addresses in the source CSV and match against the same source contact field? That's a difficult one, actually. One of the questions, one of the choices we've been thinking about is maybe create a formula field that contains the concatenation and then see if we can match against that. But we're not yet sure how to implement it, so it's a tough one to answer. And I don't believe that there's any other products out there that have implemented this feature. And happy to take feedback on that one. If you got ideas on how we can implement it, I'd love to hear. Can you deduplicate custom objects? Not yet, as I said. That will happen pretty soon. You can see dupes on custom objects, but only merge contact, account, and leads. Correct, Brian. That's what it is. Let's see. Does dedupe on contact handle NPSP account model where one household must be deleted if no contacts remain in it? No, there is no vertical specific or app specific kind of logic in this deduplicator application yet. Typically, what has to happen is you have to you run another pass. You can just use Apsona to go find the households that don't have any contacts associated with them, and then delete them. That's quite easy to do after the fact. That's John Fine's question. Ben's question: the NPSP merging does pre and post merge cleaning to deal with automatic functionality. Is there an option to run custom functionality? Perhaps invocable Apex methods. I don't know yet. I mean, right now the answer is no. But again, if you can give us more details on what kinds of functionality you're looking for there, we'll see if we can accommodate that into the tool as we develop it further. And keep in mind that this is an evolving tool. We will continue to develop it and make it a stronger offering. So your feedback is invaluable to us. Please keep them coming. Please let us know what else you would like to see in the app. Kevin says, what happens if a field is a text field and one of the values has 200 characters? Does the display show all 200 characters, or it will only show the first X number of characters? Text fields are actually limited to 32. Well, I think the recent ones are like 130 kilobytes in size. So 255 is too low. Concatenation actually is able to accommodate all of them in the 131K typically. But if you're looking at 255 characters, you are limited to that. You will not be able to exceed it for string fields, not text fields. What is the speed of the match scan? It's not bad typically. I would say try it out, Ariel. Certainly you will run into browser issues if you're looking at 1 million records, but that's not been an issue for us typically. But because most of the use cases we've seen, people typically restrict it to like 500 groups at a time, and that's well within reach of what can be done within the browser. Is exact matching case sensitive? No, exact matching is exact matching. As in, there is. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Exact matching is case sensitive. Yes, it is not case insensitive. It matches every character exactly as it is seen. Interested in the ability to compare with other fields. Yeah, we addressed that one already. Let's see, what else? Can we run a deduplication where we match one filter or another? That is also to be developed. It's not there yet. It's on our roadmap. Let's see, any other questions? Let's find chat. How does the trial work? You can simply download the App Exchange app and install it, and you'll get a 30-day trial. Yeah, these are questions about trials, and let's see if I can close this for a second. If you go into our, let's kill this off. If you go into our product page here that talks about Dedupe and Match, you see that you've got some details here. If you look at the pricing page, you see the Dedupe and Match pricing, $750 for up to 3 users and $250 for each additional user per year. There's a nonprofit pricing as well. So if you go into the nonprofit section here and scroll down, you see the Dedupe and Match pricing for nonprofits. So pricing wise, I think we come quite significantly less expensive compared to the other products out there. I don't think there's any issue on that one. Trials, you asked about trials. You just install the trial. You will automatically get a 30-day, and you can try it out the way, however you want it. More questions. John says dedupe is not reversible. Can de-reparent? No, you cannot de-reparent, unfortunately. That's why. And similarly, you cannot undo the concatenations that happen when you do the merge, which is why you would want to do a backup. But de-reparenting is a big question. That there's not a decent way to do that. What happens about last names with spaces? Mac Vander, why does the voluntary naming fields both look blank but show as discrepancies? That's because of the way we have it set up, and I'll answer that separately offline. You can make it ignore punctuations, and when you do that, it will ignore spaces as well. Let's see, what else? I have been working with a file of 400+ records, manually reviewed and scored for the master. Many more dupes were found. They're all marked for delete and annotated. Can a score be applied using the reason for deletion field as the dupe? Yeah, you should be able to just add a rule to give it a high score. That shouldn't be a problem, Pallavi. Chad says, if we have a need to carry over all related past address records, we need to merge accounts first and then contacts. Correct. No future features use contact match, but choose to bring all the account addresses over to the master account. I don't know yet. I can't speak to that because I haven't really thought through what the consequences would be of involving other objects other than the one that we're deduplicating right now. So Chad, again, we can discuss that offline. When you delete a contact, it sometimes creates an anonymous household. Yes, we know that. That's the only way to handle that right now is to simply go into the household object, the account object, and delete the records without any children, the ones that have no children. And that's easy to find with an Apsona filter, as I said earlier. Is there a way to do a dedupe scenario, Jeff Eisenberg says, that only brings match groups where there's conflicts in particular fields? For example, 2 contacts with the same first name, last name, and email, but have different home numbers. This would ignore records where a home number in one record is blank, but blank in another. So why wouldn't you could simply just give it a score for the home number? If home number is available, you give it a high score, and so that would pull that as a master, wouldn't it? I would think that should do it, Jeff. I might need to look at that again. I'm happy to get back to talk to you, Jeff, about it afterwards. Thanks so much, everyone. This has been invaluable. Really appreciate your taking the time to spend an hour with us this morning. As I said earlier, please reach out to us if you have email, if you have questions about anything at all. we'd be delighted to respond. We really are continuing to develop the product, so your ideas are always invaluable to us. Rob has a question. Rob Hampton, you had a question? Yes, sir. He put it in the Q&A. Okay, let me see. Can I upsert, he says, find a matching record and update it or insert it if not found? Not with the find ID, but what you can do, typically what you would do is, I think you're talking about the find ID mechanism. What you can do there is, you can just do the find ID. It gives you a CSV file anyway. You can throw out the ones that have a record ID in them and take the rest and insert them. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is you can do the Apsona standard import to use that CSV file as the input data source, and it'll do the upsert the way you want it. So yes, the answer to your question, Rob, is it can be done. Not directly, as in not in one step. You just take the CSV output of the find CSV and use it as input to the import mechanism, right? Any other questions? Okay, sounds reasonable. Brian Beck added a question to Q&A. Shorten names. Is there a DB file? Can names not in the DB be added? We don't yet expose the database of first and last names nor the account names. That's on our roadmap. But in the short term, if you find that there are some things that aren't being caught, send us a note, and we'll be happy to enhance the product to meet those needs as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate the opportunity to spend some time here with you. We'll get back to you. Goodbye.